It's a great honor to be back here again. I had the honor of being here last year, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Kevin Finnessy and praise him for keeping this going, because, and of course, you are all keeping it going as well. But I was asked by a couple of people in the US that I deal with in business, because I put this on my Twitter about the Percy French Festival, and they asked what it was, and I said it's utterly unique. There's nothing else like it in Ireland. There's nowhere else you can go to in Ireland where these discussions are taking place. And keeping this alive and building on this foundation is enormously important, and it's a great service to Ireland that this festival continues and that you all support it. So thank you. My topic is how do you fix Ireland and other impossible, seemingly impossible missions. And of course, this isn't going to be solved by politics. I think everybody here knows that. As somebody once said, culture eats politics for breakfast, and it does. And we have had a massive shift in culture in this country that's been driven over the period of my lifetime. I'll be 53 the day after tomorrow, actually. And what I've witnessed in my lifetime, what you've all witnessed in your lifetimes in terms of what has happened, it's not just that when I went to my grandparents' house in Achill Island or my grandparents' house in Lishy na Helcha near Glenamaddy, one of my jobs at both houses was to draw the drinking water from the nearby well, the pump in the case of Lishy na Helcha, and from the well in Achill Island. And many of the people in this room who are sort of my vintage or more experienced will have had similar experiences, especially if you lived in the west of Ireland. And we all saw that. And it breaks my heart to think and to sort of acknowledge to myself that I'm glad my grandparents aren't here to see what Ireland has become. Because the Ireland where, and people will say, oh, Ganley's on about sort of De Valera's vision of comely maidens dancing at the crossroads and everything else. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I'm a patented inventor. I love technology. I love advancement. I love progress, real progress. I really despise cultural destruction wrapped in a veil of so-called progress that is fake, that is false, and that is built on lies. And the progress that in material progress that we've made in Ireland, the material advancement is undeniable. We see it in every aspect of our lives. And I think one of the advantages, the few advantages that has been brought by Ireland being colonized by the Bay Area of San Francisco, is that we have much better coffee than we used to have. And that is an advantage and something that I enjoy. But Ireland has been colonized again. And it has been colonized by ideas and fashions that were not born here, that came in here not even from the traditionally Irish cities of the United States and of the English-speaking world, of Liverpool, of London, of New York, of Boston, and of the industrial eastern seaboard out into places like as far as Milwaukee and Chicago. It's been colonized by a culture that is fairly recently been born out of Hollywood and then adopted in the Bay Area of San Francisco and promoted by culturally driven behemoths, or that have become culturally driven, the likes of Google and Facebook and Twitter, and these very large corporations that they don't actually belong to any one country, but they do come out of that culture and have decided that it is their duty to control speech, control thought, decide what can and cannot be discussed, decide what is and is not legitimate to be discussed, and have taken ownership of the public square. The public square is no longer occupied by by RTE, or even by the Irish Times or the traditional print media, or even RTE. It's an older generation that listen to RTE still and that read the Irish Times. But if you were to ask these youngsters here, how often do you actually watch RTE? Let me ask you, do you watch it once a week? Do you watch it once a month?
I watch it every day.
Well, there you go. You're unusual. Okay, so these young ladies here are shaking their heads. So you watch it every day. But my kids, my eldest she's nearly 27. My youngest is 19. We've got 4 from 27 down to 19. They never watch it. They said, Dad, we don't. It doesn't matter what they say. We don't watch it. That's not where we get our information from. It's not what we watch. It's not where we get our news from. They curate their own news to the degree that these tech behemoths allow them to do so. And we've seen in Ireland a sort of a trend to become dedicated followers of fashion, of Bay Area culture, because that's where you make money now in Ireland. If you have a law firm in Dublin, if you have a services firm, these are the employers, these are the money generators, and you can make a very good living servicing their needs in this country. And I'm all for foreign direct investment. I think it's a great thing. But it has changed our culture. And it's changed it in a way that I think has, as I say, it's sort of privatized and shrunk the public square from where we need it to be. We need a public square in Ireland where and as previous speakers have said, where all ideas can be discussed and debated honestly and truthfully. And that doesn't happen here anymore. I've spent time in recent months in the US. I built a business there and in other parts of the world. And when you're at home here for a long period of time, sometimes you can kind of lose track of just how absurd things have become in this country. Absolutely absurd. The lockdowns. We've had the most aggressive lockdowns in the world. I mean, I was seeing full restaurants in South Bend, Indiana in May. For months, this has been going on in all across the US. Florida, Texas, pretty much stayed open. But you wouldn't even know that from the Irish media. I post stuff up on Twitter about, I was in an Irish pub a couple of weeks ago it's called the Irish Inn at Glen Echo, which is in Maryland, just outside the Washington, D.C. border. There was a big trad session in there. There was about 10 musicians playing Irish trad music. Restaurant packed. Okay, people are vaccinated. People weren't even wearing masks. And I'm not an I'm vaccinated. I've been vaccinated twice. I've got 2 Pfizers. Because I travel a lot, I get tested very regularly. But the degree to which we do things with a zealotry that used to be reserved for other areas in the past, that we have become zealots in wanting to be seen as the best boys in the class by other people in the world. It seems to be born out of a sense of insecurity, ultimately. And when you step outside the Irish bubble, it actually looks craven and pathetic. It really does. And it looks craven and pathetic outside, but it doesn't look craven and pathetic inside. The fact that we can't debate so many things anymore, that so many issues are settled, that shouldn't be settled, that should be constant issues for debate. And why is that? Why do we have in Ireland a uniformity of groupthink not found anywhere else outside of totalitarian regimes? We're not totalitarian. We are a democracy, but there's nowhere else that has such a controlled public square, such uniformity of ideas and thoughts. And by the way, pretty much none of those ideas are born in this country. They're all imported. And they're implemented, and we're told that if you question them or you challenge them, there's something wrong with you, or you must have been hooked up with the Russian mafia, as Kevin said, and you'll have the ad hominem attacks that will be mounted because you dare to question the consensus. Ireland has had the longest running ban on public worship in the world outside of North Korea and Saudi Arabia, on Christian public worship, the longest. Did you read that in the Irish media? No. They're not doing their job. Kevin asked the question earlier, who's here from the national media? Anyone here from the national media? Of course not. Because the best thing to do, I mean, they'd have to report. You know, there's more people in this tent right now than there is at almost every one of those things that they go and cover cravenly. None of you were paid by an NGO to be here today. Do you know how many people work in the NGO sector in Ireland now? About 100,000 people are on the NGO payroll, in the payroll of some NGO or others. So we have a very large civil service, professional civil service, who are very good, in my opinion, by and large. And then you have this NGO sector of para-civil servants who seem to make an existence on looking for problems and calling for solutions and demanding whatever it is that the latest thing that needs to be, on creating need by chasing issues that they're getting funding from the government to go and find. So it becomes this great big self-fulfilling feeding trough of activism that's driving the agenda. It's not being driven from grassroots democratic action by grassroots democratic concerns. So why did we not hear in the media that Ireland had the longest running ban on public worship, Christian public worship in the world outside of North Korea and Saudi Arabia? Well, because that makes us actually look absurd. So let's just not say it, because then people might start to question how ridiculous and absurd this all looks from the outside, and indeed from the inside, if you're allowed to talk about it. And then you read the Irish Constitution. And if you haven't read it recently, it's really worth reading. Don't trouble yourself reading the amendments because it takes a while to get through them all. But if you read the main body of the Constitution itself, it took me a few years to realize this. This is probably the single best constitution in the world, bar none. It's phenomenal. I just realized the other day it actually references the common good. It says it in the Constitution. Look for that in other constitutions. It references the common good, something that's very fashionable to talk about now in intellectual circles. It references it. So what do we do about all of this? Well, I would say we have a great constitution. Let's start to actually do what it says and respect the rights that it recognizes and be prepared to defend it. Because I absolutely guarantee you, and this already started a few years ago, but COVID came along and sort of knocked it off the agenda for a while, but there will be a concerted effort to destroy the Irish Constitution, get rid of it, and replace it with some woke Bible. It's going to come. And be ready to stand up and defend your Constitution, because it is the very essence of our country and what it was built for, and what men and women fought and died for to secure this country's independence, so that we really could create something that a nation and a country that we could be proud of. And by the way, there's no issue or problem, as far as I'm concerned, of this nation being a very proactive and a much more proactive and perhaps slightly less obedient member of the European Union. Because the idea that we adopt every idea that comes out of Brussels suggests that Brussels is a place that's got lots of good ideas. It doesn't. It doesn't. Actually, we need to have the courage to stand up and be able to define a vision and an idea of Europe that Ireland wants to be part of, and that actually can give direction to Europe. Europe is directionless right now. Europe's directionless right now, and it needs a pilot. It's sort of running on autopilot at the moment, and if it carries on the way that it's going, we're not just going to have one Brexit, we're going to have more of them. Other member states will leave the European Union and the European project will fail. And some people might welcome that. I won't be one of them, because it's going to put another 200 years to put Humpty Dumpty back together again in Europe, and probably at least one more major war, and maybe more than that, if it can ever be done. And there are hostile actors that want to destroy the potential that still exists in Europe. And those hostile actors are ensconced in Beijing and in some other places, the Communist Party of China, that it's extremely aggressive and has now really dropped the mask and is making it clear that what it is set upon is global dominance ideologically in every field of economics, of media, of thought, of ideas, you name it, they want to dominate it. That is real totalitarian, a real totalitarian regime that is avaricious and wants to aggressively expand its power. And so what do we have to do in Europe and in Ireland is we have to grow up. We have to stop the nonsense. We have to stop being petulant children chasing every fashionable, quirky idea that comes out of the Bay Area of San Francisco, and we've got to get serious again. We need to read our Constitution and understand what those things mean and what's important in it. And so how do we even break the logjam and clear the barriers and the barbed wire that has been put around the public square in Ireland? How do we do that? How do we avoid the searchlights and actually get in there and be able to speak? How can somebody like Kevin Myers get a public platform again where he can say what he believes? And so can anybody else, and anybody else can come and challenge him without trying to cancel him and people like him. So I have a few suggestions of things that I think would be useful. And many of you here may not agree with them, and that's okay, because we're supposed to be able to table controversial, provocative ideas and discuss the pros and cons of those ideas. One thing we need to get rid of in Ireland is the system of voting that we have of this transferable vote where you list a set of preferences. Why? What do we need to change it for? We need to move to a list system, because the way that we allocate preferences here produces a body politic that aims for the lowest common denominator. It forces candidates to move into a center, but a center that over the last 4 decades has continued to move sort of left, not economically, but certainly socially, and has knocked the whole system off kilter. So why in Dáil Éireann do we have complete consensus, including from the likes of Sinn Féin, the once upon a time rebels, who have nothing to say on the truly controversial, topical issues of our time? Why isn't some major party in Dáil Éireann standing up and saying, look at Florida, look at Texas? Why have we had the most severe lockdown, one of the most severe lockdowns in the world? Why have we banned religious worship here for a longer period than anybody else? Why have we not heard Sinn Féin saying that? This is supposed to be the government in waiting, the next opposition party. Because they're not a serious opposition. It's one groupthink bubble of politics and media driven to a consensus that has become unchallenged Also because we're a small country and everybody knows each other, or everybody knows somebody's cousin or brother or sister, and sure, I don't want to, they're nice people, You don't want to say anything. No, you have to challenge dumb ideas. And so we need to change the voting system. We need to move to a list system to break the logjam of the lowest common denominator. We need reform of Shannon Aaron, of the Senate. It can no longer be a holding pattern for super annuated politicians or up-and-coming politicians. It needs to be a deliberative body that has legislative power and that can actually initiate legislation, that can block legislation, and that can challenge the lower house of the Oireachtas. That's what a bicameral legislature is supposed to do, and ours does not do it. So our democracy is really broken. I mean, they tried to get rid of the Senate a few years ago by saying, sure, it's just a place for useless politicians, and a lot of the people that were actually campaigning for that and saying that are in the thing now. So we need to return and restore to proper bicameralism where the upper house is a challenge to the lower house in terms of ideas, debates, etc. And we need to select the Senate in a way that is completely different to the way that we select the members of the Dáil. And I think even different to the way that we select the Seanad right now. But we need Senate reform, and we need to return to proper bicameralism. And when we do that, we can get rid of this stupid citizens' assembly, the biggest plastic fake democracy thing that anyone ever came up with. Outrageous. I mean, that a polling company gets to pick people that come in and deliberate and set the agenda for the current or next government. All of this stuff is a laboratory to cook up the latest wacky idea and sell it to the Irish people as though the idea came from them. It's completely manipulative. It is fundamentally undemocratic. And we have ended up with a third house of the legislature, which is doing a job that is one of the jobs that the Senate should be doing, and certainly a job and a set of responsibilities that TDs should have. It does not belong anywhere in our democracy, and that thing needs to be abolished as quickly as possible. And then we need to make recourse to the law something that's effective. Years ago, Mary Robinson and I were having lunch in Galway. I like Mary Robinson. We have completely different worldviews on lots and lots of different things, but I admire her as an intellectual. And she talked to me about her very passionate belief in social change through the law. That actually you don't do social change through democracies because democracy is illiberal. It brings out the tradition in people, that that people are subject to populist whims. She didn't say that. I'm paraphrasing now, and this is a very widely held belief in so-called elite circles now, and it stayed with me. The belief in social change through the law, that actually the way that you initiate social change is through the law. It's not through the ballot box. It's through the law. And they did that. Or at least people did that who have a different political take than mine, for example. And now we're starting to see that it is becoming more difficult to be able to challenge the consensus, even by appeal to law and to the Constitution. I have to be careful what I say here because I'm actually in the courts on a case, more than one case, right now. But when we had that referendum on judges' pay, I voted no. I said we should not allow judges' pay to be touched. They should be paid a lot of money. They do a really, really important job. It should be one of the highest paid jobs in this country. You want your judges to be extremely well compensated, and you want lots of judges, and you want lots of jury trials. But the judiciary has been starved of resources. The courts have been starved of resources. And I put it to you that none of this is accidental. That it is absolutely deliberate. It is a way to deny every one of you recourse to redress through the law. And then let's talk about what it costs to bring a case. That if you want to initiate protection of your constitutional rights, not social change, protection of your constitutional rights that exist through the law, that you actually can't do it because you would need a couple of fortunes to be able to take on the risk of filing suit in a constitutional case, which if you lose, you are at risk of getting stuck with the costs of the state defendants, which could end up being millions of euro. They line up 17 professional witnesses and pay them for their time, and they roll out 6 barristers and 5 juniors and you name it, and those costs rack up, and it becomes an absolute impediment to be able to be able to access the courts to seek redress. And the way to fix that, and I've thought about this long and hard, is to eliminate this archaic medieval law called shampity that we still have on the books here in Ireland. I think we're one of 2 countries that still have shampity on the statute in our laws. The UK got rid of it recently. It doesn't exist in the US. I think every common law country now, except Ireland, I might be wrong about that, has largely got rid of shampity laws. What's shampity? Shampity means that somebody else cannot fund. So let's say you want to take a legal action against the state or against a company, a large company. Maybe there's a medical issue. You need to be able to file a lawsuit and be able to take action. Or maybe 15 or 16 of you together want to do that because there's maybe an environmental issue going on where you live, whatever it might be. You have to be able to fund that yourself. You can't go out and get somebody else or a law firm to say, we will pay for and fund your lawsuit because we think it is meritorious. We think you're going to win. And if we do win, we will get the costs back. And if we do win, we'll take 30% of whatever your award is. And shampity says you can't do that, that unless you can fund it yourself, you can't go to somebody else and have them fund your case for you, because otherwise that's going to encourage frivolous lawsuits. Well, let me tell you, there's no shampity law firm that will take on a frivolous lawsuit because they don't want to waste their time and money with frivolous lawsuits. The first thing you have to do is convince them of the merit of your case. And they have a higher bar to clear, generally, than the courts do. They're very, very careful in terms of the cases that they take. But that recourse is not available to Irish people, Irish citizens, because of this shampity law. The shampity laws are not talked about. Hardly anybody knows about them. But they're very important because they are the barrier to prevent collective, effective legal action and recourse to the Constitution by the citizens and people of Ireland. They need to be abolished. They've been abolished pretty much everywhere else. They need to be abolished here. And that's something that we should talk to our TDs about, I would put it to you, because when you do that, the abuses that are taking place will start to be challenged legally, and that will soon soften coughs. It will change the nature of the debate and how it takes place. If someone is shutting down access to the public square or committing an abuse, and they know that actually they're at serious risk of being held legally accountable for that and actually having to pay if they lose a case, they'll think twice about shutting down access to the public square or whatever it may be. And goodness knows, we really do need new voices and not so much new ideas, but people who are prepared to stand up and defend tradition and not say that tradition in Ireland is something that we should be ashamed of or that's a disgrace and that the past was all terrible and bad things were done. There's an awful lot to be proud of in this country. There's a phenomenal foundation that was built here of integrity, of virtue, of courage, of guts, of work ethic. All of those values. I'm from not too far away from here. I've got a funny accent because I was born in Watford, and the London Irish community. My father's from Glenamaddy. My mother's from Duiga in Achill Island. My father is the straightest man I ever met. He's never had so much as a credit card. They talk about George Washington and they say George Washington never told a lie. Talking about truth. They say George Washington never told a lie, and you read that and you think, well, that can't be true. He must have told some lies. My father never told a lie. There's plenty of times he should have, but he never told a lie. Not in his life. And he's 80 this year. And what he has seen happen to this country has broken his heart. It's a betrayal of everything him and his generation worked for, taught their children, the values that they instilled. And now, everywhere they turn, they're told they're wrong. It makes me very angry. And I'm not the only one that it makes angry. And this, by the way, is how you end up with Trumps. With people that will come along, as the previous excellent speaker said, and effectively will ring bells that they know people want to hear and tell them what they want to hear and stand on a platform and make the right noises. But there is a deep well here in this country. This is a Christian country in its traditions and its roots and its being. We don't even know what existed here before Christianity came, before the time of St. Patrick and St. Bridget and the early saints of Ireland. But we do know that Ireland did save civilization, and it really did. I was in Switzerland visiting a number of monasteries that the Irish set in St. Gallen a few weeks ago. And you see what these monks did. It was phenomenal. Father Vincent Toomey's here. Father Vincent and his generation of Irish missionaries, the work that they did, the unsung work that they did all over the world. I mean, you could make movie after movie about what happened. In my house in Moyne Park, there was a Father Michael Murphy from Cork. He was a professor of canon law. He was 33 years old, and just before the outbreak of the Second World War, he went out to Papua New Guinea. He was saying mass when the carrier battle group that had attacked Pearl Harbor swung back down into the South Pacific and invaded Papua New Guinea, amongst other islands. And he was saying mass, and he was dragged out while saying mass by the Japanese, and he was buried alive. But no one even knows about him. And we have so many heroes and saints that came out of this country in even current times and recent living memory. I was educated by Irish Dominican nuns in Watford before we moved back home to Ireland. I was educated by the Mercy Sisters in Glenamaddy. Every one of those women were outstanding teachers, outstanding examples. I found out years after I left school that they used to clean the school in Glenamaddy after we left. We didn't even know. Who does that now? It has to be contracted out to Noonan Cleaning or whoever it is. I don't know, but it's you. Certainly we're paying for it through our taxes. They did all of this out of vocation. There is so much more in tradition and in what our forefathers left us that is of value than is not of value. And we are, talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater, we are taking a sledgehammer to the foundations of our culture and of our country and smashing it and putting fractures into it and pouring hate and scorn on something that we no longer even understand. There was a reason Ireland adopted Christianity without the Roman army having to be here, because we saw it was a really good idea, that those virtues and those fundamental ideas were good. That respect for life, for the integrity, for the dignity of every human being was something that was of enormous value. And that submission to mystery, submission to God and the idea of God and the Holy Trinity was something worthy, was something forward-thinking, and was something that didn't pretend to have all of the answers. And I think very soon, and already we are seeing that what modernity is proposing as progress, in fact, is really short when it comes up on answers. There's something really wrong, and I'll wrap up very shortly, when we spend almost a year not being able to even talk about the fact that the virus that shut down our lives for more than 18 months was manufactured in a quasi-weapons lab in Wuhan in China through gain-of-function changes that were being made to that virus. You couldn't even talk about it in the Irish media. Now, it wasn't just in Ireland, it was other places as well. Our institutions failed us. Failed. Our elites failed us. And why have our elites failed us? Because they're not elite. Elite means you're really, really good at your area of specialization. And elites need to have complementary skills, not the same skills, not the same ideas. And a real elite needs to be able to challenge the consensus all of the time. General MacArthur said during his military campaigns, when he would bring his staff officers into a tent in a campaign, and he brought all 10 of his staff officers into his campaign tent or his campaign headquarters, if all of his 10 campaign staff officers agreed on a plan, he would do something completely different. Because he knew there was something wrong with it when there was such huge consensus. It was too obvious. There was something they were missing. And we need to get like General MacArthur. We need to question the consensus. We need to challenge the consensus. And that, everybody has a role to play here. Everybody. This isn't something where it's going to be everyone in this room, every single one of you, especially the young people, and all of us. It doesn't matter if you're 99 or 102 years old. Every one of us has the opportunity to challenge the consensus. Don't challenge them on everything and anything. It's, you don't have to be against everything. You don't have to be a complete contrarian. But where you know something is a lie, when it's glaringly obvious, don't be afraid to stand up and be the person that says, the emperor has no clothes. We need more people in Ireland who are willing to stand up and say, the emperor has no clothes. Because I promise you, the emperor has no clothes. Thank you.